Cupra is a performance brand of Seat. It's kind of split off into a separate company, but both brands are part of the Volkswagen Group. The Volkswagen Group started its electric journey in full force with the ID.3 a couple of years ago. Now that has kind of developed into the ID.4, and the other brands in the Volkswagen Group, Audi and Skoda, have headed off in an SUV direction. But Cupra has decided to come out with their own spin on the ID.3. It's called the Born. It looks terrific. Let's have a look at it. But before we tell you about the Cupra Born, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Cupra Born is basically a rebodied ID.3 at one level, but there are some considerable stylistic differences. The rear looks basically the same, but it does have a slightly more mature look and obviously the Cupra branding. The front is where the biggest difference lies. As you can see, it's got a more fierce appearance than the ID.3, which is befitting of the performance nature of this brand. There are 3 motor and battery variants. The basic one which we have here is 204 PS with a 58 kilowatt hour battery. And then you can have a 58 kilowatt hour e-boost version, which isn't available yet, but you can order it with 230 PS. And then top of the range is you get the 230 PS with a 77 kilowatt hour battery. There are 3 trim levels available: the V1, the V2 and the V3. Even the V1 trim is really well equipped, coming with 18-inch wheels. You get the rear view camera for reversing, electric heated mirrors, there's LED headlights from the word go as well. You even get adaptive cruise control on the basic model. 11 kilowatt AC charging is included as standard as well. The V2 version adds 19-inch wheels, a head-up display. You get heated washer nozzles and heated front seats as well. The V3 trim, which is what we have here, has these 20-inch wheels and a more plush interior. So I mentioned that more powerful e-boost version with 230 PS. You can only get that one with the V2 and V3 trims. Let's take a look inside. So one of the areas where Cupra has diverged from the ID.3 is the interior. With the V1 and V2 you get a sequel interior. Sequel is a recycled material based on plastic materials that have been polluting the sea. However, as we have a V3 version, we have a different material. This is a dynamic microfiber, which is made from recycled polyester, which is stuff like clothing. Another thing you only get with the V3 trim are these electrically adjustable seats, so they don't have a memory function. So let's have a look at this interior. So you'll also notice that there is a phone charger here. Now that is a slightly different design from the one in the ID.3, which is enclosed and has a tendency to make your phone get rather hot. You get this extra cubby behind here underneath the armrest, and then underneath this section here, if I just wind that forward, you'll see that there is a couple of cup holders. Now these do look like the VW design, but we really like the cup holders in that because they have these catches on the side here that allow you to put different sizes of drinks cup, which is really handy. Interior space is exactly the same as an ID.3, and that was a good thing because the front, plenty of headroom. I'm 5'10", and if I was 6'2", I'd still be okay. This glove box is reasonably small. Just half the width of the actual compartment is available for putting things in. Space isn't too bad in the back here either. Still a decent amount of headroom, but probably not so much if you're over 6 foot. There's a decent amount of knee room too. If you're over 6 foot, it's going to be a little bit cramped, but it's better than some hatchbacks. One thing we should also mention is that even though this is the top level trim, there's still no sunroof. That is an option with the ID.3. Middle seat is obviously not as wide as the Alta 2, but not too bad. If you don't have a middle seat passenger, you can pull the seat back down and get this couple of cup holders. While this central section does offer 2 USB-C ports for rear seat passengers, there are no controls for air conditioning. However, the seat backs do have pockets for your kids to put their copies of Don Quixote or whatever it is kids read these days. One area that is exactly the same as the Volkswagen ID.3 is boot space. So if you open the boot, this basic capacity is 385 litres, exactly the same as the ID.3. There is some space here for your charging cables, but you'll notice that there's quite a big lip here, and there's obviously a ledge for putting an extra boot stage on top to make this flatter, but that would reduce the amount of capacity. If you're going skiing or have a Christmas tree to pick up, or just want to put somebody very long kind of lying flat, there's this extra space in the middle that you can open up. Take the ledge off the back here, Once you've removed that, you can fairly easily drop this forward with the typical 60-40 arrangement, and that gives you 1,267 litres of space, which is not too bad. Not quite as much as an estate car, but certainly large on the hatchback front. Again, you'll notice that there's this ledge here, which it's not completely flat. Obviously, there is going to be the possibility of putting something over the top here. You gain more capacity this way, but it's not flat, so you're going to have to put something underneath here if you want to have an item that's kept flat in the boot of the car. There is a 12-volt supply here, which you can use for attaching, I don't know, a fridge in the back, or if you want to put a child in here, they can have a device powered here. You get these hooks on both sides for hanging baggage. Another small feature we like is the fact that the seat belts are kept out of the way when you put the seats back up again. The Cupra Born doesn't really differ that much from the ID3 when it comes to range. There was supposed to be a 45 kilowatt hour battery version, but that seems to have been cancelled now. So the base model, the 58 kilowatt hour version, has a range of about 260 miles, and there's a version with a 77 kilowatt hour battery which goes up to 340 miles, which is quite considerable. As we already stated, all cars come with 11 kilowatt AC, which will be useful if you have a place of work that has those kinds of chargers, but most homes will only have 7 kilowatts. On that kind of charger, the 58 kilowatt hour battery will take about 9 hours to charge from 0 to full. There's 120 kilowatt DC charging as well, which takes about 35 minutes to get from 10 to 80%, which is decent. That's enough for a long journey, no problem. So the controls inside are a mixture of exactly the same as an ID3 and subtly different. The steering wheel is a little bit more comfortable, feels a bit more like its quality. You've got controls for the adaptive cruise, which I said is standard across all models, on the left. You've got media controls on the right. You've got separate controls for the lights on one side and windscreen wipers on the other side. You'll see there's some discrete buttons here for operating a few key functions like the rear demister and the rear fog lights. So these are your drive controls just to the right of the steering wheel. You roll up for drive or B mode, you've got down for neutral and reverse, and this button on the end selects park. You do have some separate controls here down at the bottom of the display. You've got volume controls for the stereo, but strangely no mute button, just like the ID3. And then you've got dual zone climate control with hot and cold on either side. But if you want to go for the rest of the controls, you have to go through the main display. We quite like the minimalism of the Volkswagen Group dashboard display. It gives you everything you need. You've got speed in the middle, you've got some ADAS safety stuff on the left hand side. It tells you whether you're in drive, park, etc. on the right. And there's a few other displays dotted around the screen as well. You can just about see there, that's the HUD. It's not very visible with the camera, but it's much easier to see for the driver's position. So let's go through a few functions of the LCD. This is the kind of basic view, which gives you a sat nav, radio, and if your mobile phone is connected, it'll be on the right here. You've got some quick functions. This is kind of useful. You can scan this and get apps and get control over various aspects of the car with that QR code. That gives you some ideas about efficiency. If you press on this one, you can see some various settings for the control. You've got controls for, because it's haptic, so you notice how it's popping up when my finger approaches. You know, various parking assistance, driver profiles. This is currently set to comfort, set to performance. There's the e-manager, which is, you know, telling you your charging functions. You can set some routines there as well. Different styles of lighting, and you can go into the full settings for the car. You'll also notice these climate controls along the top. Now this has some presets as well. It's eco mode, climate, full climate control. Some of these buttons are replicated. This car has a heated steering wheel, which you can turn on here. So this is the 204 PS version of this car, which means it's about as quick as a typical ID3, so about 7.2 seconds to hit 62 miles per hour. Now if you get the e-boost version with 230 PS, that drops to 6.6 seconds. Obviously if you go for the big battery with the e-boost, it goes back again to about the same as the standard version. That actually makes the e-boost big battery version of this car a more interesting proposition than the Tour version of the ID3, which, you know, you lose a fair bit of performance by going up to the bigger battery. So Cupra talks about things like having multi-link rear suspension. Obviously this car, like the ID3, is rear wheel drive, which means that it's pretty fun to drive. Having all the power going to the rear wheels means that the steering is light. There's no sense of torque steer either. The steering does feel really tight. Although this isn't a super quick car, you know, if you're going to get something like a Golf R, for example, the new version, you're talking about 5 seconds to 60 miles an hour. It's not as quick as that, but it feels pretty tight. It feels dynamic. In performance mode, you've got immediate throttle response. It's certainly fast enough to be enjoyable. You're not going to win any drag races with a Tesla, but then again, maybe that's not what you want. Maybe what you're looking for is a practical family hatchback that has a little bit of performance and some driving dynamics, and it certainly fits that bill. Now Cupra's also talking about the brakes that it uses. These are 330mm on the standard vehicle with 23mm thick, and then they're a bit larger. They're actually 340mm and 27mm with the e-boost version, so you get more stopping power, which is probably what you need when those cars are just that little bit quicker. Now we know from our experiences with the ID3 that these cars are pretty good on a motorway. They feel planted, they're fairly aerodynamic, so the range isn't too bad. You don't lose too much by going on a motorway. So let's talk about the safety tech that you have as standard. Now, one of the things that we liked about the ID3, which again you've got with this Cupra Born, is all the safety kit is available from the standard model upwards. We like the fact that you get adaptive cruise control and a reversing camera on all models of this car. It will detect road signs and put them up on that HUD or on the screen in front of you. There's apparently some kind of tiredness detection. And of course there's lane assistance, which again, that pops up on the dashboard display and the HUD. It's one of the less intrusive versions of this technology. We find that on some of these lane assist systems, they give you such a shove when you go out of lane that it's almost too distracting and could make things a bit less safe than they're intending to. There is some level of emergency steering with this car, although we actually haven't seen that kick in our driving tests so far. So the Cupra Born doesn't have the same low entry price as the ID3. The basic price is getting on for £35,000. And if you go for the V2 version, you're something like 36.5, and you're well into £37,000 territory for the V3. If you go for the e-boost version of this car, that's going to cost you nearly £3,000 more entry level. However, it's worth bearing in mind that you have to start off with the V2 trim with that. Similarly with the e-boost that has the bigger battery, that's going to cost you around £40,000. That is a similar price to the Tour version of the ID3, and of course you're getting a more powerful motor with that price as well. If you're not a boy racer and you're just looking for a reasonably fast hatchback with plenty of style, this car ticks most of the boxes that you need. However, it's not quite a GTI. The e-boost will be closer, but it still won't quite be there. It'll be a GTI from a few years ago, but not a current GTI or Golf R level of performance. There's definitely something about this car. The Cupra brand has that little bit of air of extra quality. The interior of this car is just that little bit nicer than an ID3, which gives it a greater sense of occasion when you get inside it. We don't think this version drives particularly different to an ID3, but that e-boost version with a little bit of extra performance should differentiate it more. So that's the Cupra Born. In its current guise, it's kind of a more stylish version of the ID3, but when those e-boost versions arrive, it will have that little bit of performance edge over the ID3, which will make it well worth considering. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel.